Hello and welcome to today's introductory session, which is going to focus on the quality improvement tool, process mapping. So by the end of this short video, you should have developed an awareness of what a process map is and when you would use one, how to construct a process map, what is meant by the terms value added and non-value added, how we look at different stages of mapping and how this tool applies and how it's meaningful within a workplace scenario. So a process map, in essence, is a visual representation of an actual process in action. It should show all tasks that are completed from start to finish of the entire process, including things as well like decision points, who or where each task is completed, and you might also want to include things like timescales and averages on there too. Initially, you might want to create a process map to develop further understanding of how work is completed currently before you're making any improvements, which is usually the first utilization of the tool. It's usually to try to capture how are things working now, what is this current state and what does it look like, what's all the problems that are occurring, and also where's the variation, because usually there's multiple ways to do a process and there's probably multiple different staff members doing it in a different way, getting different outcomes as well. So it gives you a real nice overview of what's actually happening on the ground. You then can also looking at other different states. So you have your current state, your future state, but we'll come on to those in a bit more information later. During the change as well, it's a tool that you can use in multiple different stages across the project's life cycle. And you'll see what I mean when I come into it, because once we're altering the process map and redefining the process, it's almost falls into some of the actions that you would do as well. But we'll go into that in a lot more detail. There's some typical shapes that you'll use when creating a process map, as you can see on the enclosed slide here. So we've got a rounded ended kind of circle. These are basically the start and end points of a process. So as you'll imagine, as processes developing, things can be branching off. Simple example might be, is the patient fit for a surgery? And you're going to have the yes and no options. At that point, your process kind of splits and you're going to end up having probably two finish points there, depending on which process line you're following. And it might be the case that there's multiple endpoints as well, just depending on the complexity of the actual process. So usually they're used as a nice indicator to see where things are starting and stopping. You've got your connection lines, which is showing the movement of the work. Usually it goes from left to right because you want things to be going in a sequential order, but what they can do is they can show back work that's coming back over and rework, which again is another opportunity to make improvements. You've got your process step, which is just a regular square, and that is where you'll detail everything that you did. So that might be from walk to collect bandage A, walk back to patient's bedside, open bandage, all the different things that you would end up doing as part of the actual task completion. And then the decision points are in diamonds as well. And you've noticed that they've used a diamond shape for this, because if you're building from left to right, then it gives you three branches to branch off on almost straight away for if there was three different decisions or three different outcomes, for example. So there's other ones that you can utilize as well, but the most common sort of shapes you see are this. So what we've gone for here then is just to show you as a really simple, very basic example of a process. And what we've added in here, things called swim lanes, which, as you'll be able to see, it's the swim lanes that look a little bit like an Olympic swimming pool from above. So swim lanes are usually there to present who is doing what and when within the process. It helps you to see where the breakdown of work is falling. In healthcare, the who is usually a person role or a department name. So when you're naming the swim lane, that's usually what it's sort of named to. But it also could be the name of the machine in a certain department, or the machine delivering care that's completing a particular task. So things like a syringe driver, for example. Swim lanes could also represent stages in a patient's journey. For example, the admission, the treatment and the discharge. And what your swim lanes represents will depend on the problem that you're trying to solve. So maps can look very unique and different because of this. Also allows you to see and understand why things are maybe taking longer than they need, where bottlenecks are occurring and backlogs are happening. So again, nice, straight, simple, forward, easy method, but we'll go through some more examples as we go. So once you've completed your process analysis of the mapping itself, you want to start to look at this concept of value added, non-value added, and waste. There's 3 different categories that processes can be identified onto. So the next step is to start to explore your process mapping after it's captured, and starting to tag each step with a label almost. So you could start with the actual waste itself, as looked at on the waste wheel and the 8 types of lean video. So you know, where's the transport happening, where's the defects occurring, but also what you want to do is to pin down, okay, so of all the steps that we have, say this entire process is 30 steps long, how many of them 30 bring value? How many actually are what we call non-value added waste, and how many are full waste where nothing's actually occurring and it's just, so waiting, for example, for X is a perfect example. Usually, I think you'd be quite surprised when we start analysing processes, especially administrative processes. A lot of them are very extremely heavy on the value-added waste or the necessary wastes. And they're actually, when it comes to what brings value, you'll find that there's very few steps there that actually do. So sometimes it gives us a perfect opportunity to look at, okay, so maybe we need to redefine these processes, utilising other systems or other things to make sure that they can be a bit more effective than they are. So the process stop is non-value added. It's commonly referred to as waste. So what we've got here is anything that might be like note writing, report writing, ward handover, waiting. So they're all things that are necessary to happen, but they have to occur for the process to be actually complete. So there's certain things that you can't get around, like audits, for example. The waste, the non-value added. So this is things like patients sitting on waiting lists for treatment, defective treatment, so having to come back in. Maybe they've got the wrong medication, it's not done anything, so they need to come back and get a different type. It's things that are completely wasteful, that are not bringing any value. And then on the far left, we have the value-added activities, which are interesting because they, again, have to fall under the definition of 3 different criteria before they can be classed as value-added. So the first one is, again, a bit of an arbitrary one to try to get your head around, but it says, would the customer pay for this? So if you think about it, if they were having to pay, things like sitting in a waiting room for 3 hours before you were seen would be probably something that you wouldn't pay for if you had to. Second law is, does it actually move the product one closer to completion or downstream? So when we think about a patient here, you know, having your assessment is going to, having a scan is going to, having your medications are going to, sat in a bed waiting for something to happen isn't. So again, it gets really interesting when you start to look at where value is brought. And then the final criteria is it something that we can get right first time? And if we can't, if it was like, well, we're always making mistakes, or the system couldn't pick up an error of X, then you also have to argue the question, is it value added? Because if we can't get right first time, it's just duplication of work. So these 3 criteria link in quite nicely when you start looking at processes. And then the idea is, okay, so how heavy of each of these 3 are the process? Is it an equal split? Or do we find that, you know, we've got more than 50% of full waste, for example? So if we go back to our example process map, we can identify waste at the point of the decision being made regarding the acceptance or rejection of the referral. So in an ideal world, the team should not be receiving inappropriate referrals, so you can see this is an immediate opportunity to make some improvements. However, the referrals, they're usually rejected because of essential information that is missing, or that the patient maybe does not meet the certain criteria for the service. So in both incidents, this is causing waste because staff have to do unnecessary work to redo elements of the section at the start. So they usually involve sending things back to the referrer and seeking missing information. So, you know, if you could see that 10% of your work is sort of falling under that sort of premise, you can see how much wasted time is being spent within processes. So here we've got just a visual here on the 3 different states of mapping that you're likely to come across. First of all is the current state, which is usually always done when there is a problem, because it's trying to understand what's happening now and where things are going wrong. Once you've got your current state sort of pinned down, and then you've had a look at eliminating waste, redefining some of the processes, maybe even looking at how roles are moved between swim lanes so there's more balanced workloads, then you recreate your map and it comes to something called a future state map, which again, then that becomes this is the current state once it's all been agreed. Then following from that, you can have something called an ideal state map, which might be, it's almost like a business case kind of proposition, because it's almost like, well, actually, if we only had X, Y, and Z, then the process could look like this. And that might be pieces of equipment, pieces of access to systems and technology. It's hard to say. And sometimes it's usually about staffing as well, or if we had another role of X, Y, and occurring, what does this look like? But the current state aims to provide other detail about how things are doing now, with the future state identifying where the wins have been made from waste being eliminated, and some of the value added and non-value added elements understood. So as you can see from the applications and uses, a process map can be used in the workplace to better understand how work is being completed in order to do many of the things that are shown in the slide above. This helps to eliminate waste and reduce variation. It ultimately helps to reduce the time taken to complete work and therefore increase productivity by decreasing a thing called takt time of a task. It can also help to identify points of process failure and bottlenecks, and also helps you to balance workloads, because you can see where the weight of work is occurring and which swim lanes are causing the issues. It also acts as a great training resource to support staff in the completion of work, because in theory, once you've got this captured, this is how we do this. So this is like a current state training methodology. And then when you compare process measures on current state and future states as well, it helps you to demonstrate and understand the impact of the improvement you've made. Not only simply by hopefully having a visual reduction in the number of steps that are there, but you should be able to see that the overall time it takes from start to finish is reduced as well. It allows you to look at tasks where they're actually occurring. Do you need to move things further upstream? Do they need to occur earlier because we've got delays and bottlenecks with getting certain pieces of information back? If so, then it lets you to mitigate some of the waiting issues that you have. And then also identify areas of process failure. So there's quite a few different tools and things that you can do out with a process map. But again, I would just articulate here that it can take a surprising amount of time to get a map done. So I'd say just don't underestimate how long it will take. Some processes can be quite long-winded, especially how you're going to need members of each of who do what in the process to be there to map it. It might be that their availability is very limited. I've been involved in mapping work in the past, and it took weeks to get even a current state captured, so don't underestimate how long that takes. So basically, you want to understand the happening of now. What is it looking like now? And then how will it work in the future? Your current state and future state maps, basically they're separate documents, and they should be able to be used to contrast against each other. You should be able to look at the two and see the difference straight away. You need to include everyone, like I've mentioned. So if there's 7 different roles involved within a process, you need to make sure that someone's there for each role. Otherwise, when it comes to what happens in their lane, there's going to be a lot of guessing, and that's not what we want. This needs to be accurate, and this is actually what happens. Would say keep it rough, because as you go through these things, especially with really big processes, it's really easy to miss steps and think, oh, we should have gone back, we've missed something there. At least if you're keeping it rough, you got it on post-it notes, on a big flip chart or big wallpaper roll, you can do that without having to sort of recreate from scratch anything that you've made, especially if you're doing it like quite professionally. And go and follow the process. So like this tool links into a number of different ones, like getting out on the Gemba, activity follows, as well as a bit of a SciPoc mapping and PDSA, because the idea is you might want to go and observe a process more than once, because how it works one day with one person doing it might not be how it's actually working the next day when somebody else is doing it. So you might need to understand that variation that's happening and follow a process a few times. Therefore, you might get a bit of a variation in your current state map because there's not really a standardized current state. So if you have any questions in relation to process mapping following today, then please reach out, and the email address is enclosed on the slide. And we're happy to support you with any more questions in your learning journey as you go, but please do get in touch. So also enclosed is some information regarding other programs available. Some of them are looking at different quality improvement courses and different leadership courses. Some of them are half days, some of them go all through to full days, and it's the variety of that's there really. It's up to you, I think, on maybe about identifying which ones you need next. So many of the courses as well, we have CP accredited, and we're also looking at getting more of them accredited in the near future. We're going to keep you updated on anything else that we have via marketing from Strive. Please do get in contact if you need us following this training. Thank you very much.